previous slideshow, there was beginning, with some of the operas of Banning, Madame Butterfly, etc. Moving into the 1950s, we see jukeboxes being banned. Then we get to the year of Elvis, 1956. It's kind of a famous year because this is when he really broke out. Also, the shaking of his hips, the pelvic thrust. His image was really set at this point. I noticed that he was explicitly banned and told for TV appearances, for concerts, that he could not make obscene gestures with his body. And so on TV shows, they would only show him above the waist. They wouldn't show below the waist. In Florida, specifically, a court order was issued that required every one of his concerts in Florida to be filmed, so the police could then go back and look and see if he did move his waist and thrust his pelvic inappropriately, so that he could be fined for it. Because of all this, it just generated publicity. Everyone was talking about and calling him Elvis the Pelvis, and of course that was free publicity. And what do people want to see and hear? Things that are denied them. So of course, especially when you're saying, here's this guy doing racy things, he's doing inappropriate things, children, you shouldn't see this. That's of course what everyone wants to see. And so consequently, he spent 26 weeks at #1 on the charts. What does this tell us? And really something you should keep in mind with this is that as much as we're looking at this with obscenity and people having limits of what they think is obscene, we know the community standard issue, etc., that there is a desire for it. When we go into film in a couple of weeks, we're also going to look at the issue of pornography. On one hand, in the U.S., most people deny looking at pornography, saying pornography is obscene, it's inappropriate, yet it's something like a $50 billion a year industry. So on one hand, we want to have the moral authority and say, no, this is inappropriate, this is obscene, Elvis is horrible, but because he is labeled as such, that just generates more interest. And so we're going to constantly see this idea of balancing obscenity with public consumption. And you've already seen that a little bit with some of the readings and making things radio friendly, etc. We talked a little bit about last week, because artists know that if their music isn't played, then they're not going to make money. So they sometimes will still make the uncut version, put things out there that are the inappropriate version, and then release a radio version. The parents are going to want them to buy from iTunes, etc., the clean version, but oftentimes they will then also somehow get hold of the X version or the unrated version or the uncut version. And so now you have an artist selling two versions of the same song, so pulling in twice the amount of money. Another group that ran into trouble, the Beatles. The first thing that they got into trouble for in the early 1960s was John Lennon's comment that they were more popular now than Jesus. This immediately led to a lot of radio stations banning them, especially in the South. BBC refused to play a little bit of their music in England for a while because of the comment, elevating themselves above Jesus. So quickly they backed off of a comment like that and said, well, you're taking it out of context. We just meant that we're extremely popular. Most people around the world have heard of us, etc. We weren't really comparing ourselves to a deity. And that kind of simmered down. And then as we start looking at their work, though, we see that a lot of their music deals with drugs, especially the song I put here, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, noticing the LSD of Lucy Sky Diamonds. For years that was seen as just a myth, as an urban legend, and then there has been interviews with John Lennon, Paul McCartney, the writers, after the fact, in the 80s, in the early 80s, who did say yes, they did put a lot of drug references into their work. So this is, for them, it's not so much the sexual leading to obscenity, but the conduct that they're advocating in experimentation with drugs that many people would see as obscene. The Doors, if any of you know about the lead singer. There was an issue with him in Miami for actually opening his pants, pulling his penis out on stage. So again, he was arrested for obscenity. And again, most everyone can see that that immediately crosses the line. We're no longer just at, sexual imagery. We actually have full frontal nudity. And so even he acknowledged later on that that probably crossed the line. And so this was an issue as well. So we see people banning for movements with Elvis. We see experimentation with drugs as a topic that's leading to obscenity. Now actual nudity. With Madonna, she was threatened with arrest in the late 80s, early 90s for simulating masturbation at a concert. On her concert tour is actually in Detroit, where they were going to arrest her. MTV flat out refused to play her video Justify My Love for sexual imagery as well as the lyrics. And after her song Like a Prayer came out in the video, Pepsi Cola dropped her as an advertiser, advertising with her. So we see, leading into religious imagery, all of these, we now see the kind of view of obscenity being broadened. While our Miller test still says prurient interest, patently offensive, and no redeeming value, we are starting to see that, well, there's more to it than just what the Miller test is saying. Of course, Elvis, the Beatles, these and the Doors, they predate the Miller test, but we can also see that the Miller test narrowing in just on prurient interest, just looking at sexual imagery, sometimes is not adequate, because again, do we want something like the Beatles openly advocating drug use? Is that obscene, or is that leading to maybe some other term, some other legal definition we need to get to? And so this is something we are going to kind of wrestle with. In the early 80s, the PMRC was started, which refers to the Parents Music Resource Center. It was founded by Al Gore's wife, Tipper. At the time, she was very concerned with the content of music videos, especially. Remember 1981, we have MTV being launched. And so we see a shift in how music is portrayed. No longer is it just oral, A-U-R-A-L, through the ears, but it's now visual. And so with the content of music and music videos, she wanted something done, and so through the PMRC we go to the establishment of, sorry about that, with the founding of the PMRC, we moved to the establishing of record labels, meaning putting stickers on them saying explicit content, etc. Most of the people in this class probably are not old enough to remember when there wasn't some type of explicit lyric warning, but prior to the late 1980s, there was no warning whether it contained inappropriate language, drug references, etc., violent imagery, etc. But now we do have that labeling.